Hello everyone, welcome back to the Keep Productive YouTube channel. It is Francesco here. Today I am joined by Justin DeRose, who is going to be diving into his Obsidian account. But first off, Justin, tell us a bit more about yourself for those who don't know you, and a little bit more about effective remote work, which is growing very fast at the moment.
Yeah, well, so I'm Justin DeRose. Francesco and I have had the opportunity to have some conversations in the past on his podcast and on my podcast. But basically, I work for Discourse, a company that makes forum software, discourse.org, if you're interested in checking that out. I work on their technical support team. And then I also run Effective Remote Work, which is a productivity-based resource for remote workers and other people who are working in digital worlds like we are, using tools that try to get our jobs done. And basically, my goal there is to try to help people live their lives and work effectively. And how do you figure all that out together using productivity tools, using good mindsets, leadership skills, communication, and the like. And we have lots of different resources available right now. We've got two different podcasts, one called Process, which is my productivity journal of sorts where I talk through ideas and my current workflows. We have Remotely Working, which is the podcast where we talk about lots of different remote work topics, including focus, communication, emotional health, and leadership skills. And we also do some interviews over there with the remote workers and how they live their lives in remote work. And then I also have a YouTube channel, Effective Remote Work. You can search it on YouTube, where we've been talking a lot about Obsidian and some other productivity tools, specifically in the note-taking space lately.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and you just shared your tour as well, but we'll be doing a tour today. So we'll include all of Justin's links below so that you have all of the fun stuff to go and enjoy after today's video. But I'm someone that hasn't really played around as much with Obsidian. Like, I've done the odd review and sort of checked it out a little bit, but in terms of seeing how somebody's used it, I think this may be, aside from looking at a couple of people's ones on Twitter, my first actual interaction with a working Obsidian account. So I think it'll be quite nice to see how you're using it. But maybe you can take us through the sort of primary uses of your account.
Sure. Yeah. So the main way that I'm using Obsidian is, well, there's actually three things that I'm doing at this point in time. And to be honest with you, I'm really just getting started into the meat of it right now, because I was using Roam previously. I used TiddlyWiki for a while, and a lot of the stuff that I have in my Obsidian Vault right now has been migrated in from those two accounts. And I have some other stuff in Evernote and in Bear that I haven't migrated in quite yet. But my main focus with it, or I have three really main pillars of focus with it, is one, capturing ideas and thoughts and things that I'm reading, articles, books, videos, anything that's sparking my attention and saying, hey, this is interesting. I'm writing that down, and I'm using the Daily Notes feature inside of Obsidian to do that. Secondly, I'm also using it as a kind of an incubation space for more permanent ideas that I want to flesh out and have access to at a later date in time. It's very similar to the concept of an evergreen note, like Andy Machuzek. Again, please forgive me if I have completely butchered his name. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly. But he's got a concept called evergreen notes, which is basically taking an idea and distilling it down into a few short paragraphs so that it's at a very atomic level. And then also you can link it together. So you kind of have this hyperlinked archive of notes that you can interact with in the future and think through or revisit and relearn things or spark new ideas off of it. And then thirdly, it's so I'm building those notes, but then thirdly, I have a setup in there to organize those notes using some indexes and a concept called maps of content. And so basically, I'm capturing a lot of data and then trying to translate the relevant stuff into more permanent notes that I can interact with that are relevant for much longer of a time than maybe something that I just read yesterday or something like that.
It's much more of a thought out way than I do note taking. I'm just like, I'll put it there. But it's good. Yeah, there's these underlying concepts that can help you. And yeah, I think I need to read a couple of the ones you mentioned. But yeah, I mean, take us through some of the ways of using it, because I think it will help some of the new users that are looking to use Obsidian.
Yeah, well, so I mean, talking about what you just mentioned there, you just kind of, hey, I'll write this thing down and I'll put it in my notes software. That's the way I've done notes for years. And then just recently, I have realized that maybe there's a better way to do things, because I always write stuff down, but then I never go back to it. And I never look at it, but I know that I have good ideas and good thoughts. I have the starts of projects or goals, or even, heck, potentially ideas for books or courses or things like that that come out in these times, where I'll write them down in drafts on my phone, and then I'll stash them in whatever note taking app that I'm using and say, oh, okay, well, at least I got it there, and maybe it'll come up again. But the point that I'm trying to use Obsidian for at this moment in my life is, how do I make that translation from just a thought that I have or something that engages me to something that I can find useful in the future? So it's I basically use it to write down all those thoughts, and then so when I'm writing or reading an article, or I'm watching a YouTube video that I'm learning something from, or it sparks an idea, I'm noting all of that down.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, and I'm trying to note it down in my own words. That's a key thing that I've been learning lately too, is instead of like quoting something from a book, I'm trying to translate that concept as I'm understanding it in the moment to into words that make sense for me now. Instead of, oh, well, I'm going to highlight this thing here and I'll just copy it from my Kindle highlights into my notes and then I'll remember it later. But when you come back to things later, a lot of times, especially that you've just highlighted or quoted, it doesn't really retain context. So you kind of lose the context of where it's at in the book and why that particular passage stood out to you in that moment in time, or what made sense about it. And then, but if you can distill it into your own words, then it kind of clicks in your brain a little bit more, and you can retain context because you're thinking about it differently. You have knowledge there that you have fashioned yourself out of another piece of information versus, well, let me just copy this information from one place to another so that I can hopefully search it at some point in the future. That's really the big purpose that I'm using Obsidian for right now, is to just try to translate some of that information that I'm taking in into something that I can find useful in the future.
Maybe I need to take that approach with it, because it seems like the notes I take are very one stop, versus visiting them back would probably be a better idea, and like the sort of spaced repetition sort of concept, isn't it? Yeah. I need to read those books and get jumping in on it. Justin, show us around your account and some of the ways that you're using the features of Obsidian.
All right, so this is Obsidian, if you haven't seen it before. And in the left-hand side here, we've got my folder structure. I tend to keep a fairly basic folder structure inside of Obsidian, simply because, one, right now there's no iOS or iPad OS client for Obsidian. And while I'm not using it heavily on mobile right now, I need to get moved over to Dropbox so that it works with OneWriter, which is a good markdown editor app that actually works really well with wiki linking for inside of Obsidian. It doesn't work very well when you have multiple folders. So I've just got a basic folder structure here. I've got an incubation folder, which is where all the notes that I'm trying to develop into something deeper go. I'm trying to make them more permanent. So like I have this one here on balance versus integration, which I spent some time fleshing out yesterday into something a little bit more permanent. I can show you guys that in a little bit, what that looks like. I've got this Bible study folder here. It's just literally some Bible study thoughts and notes that I have. And then daily notes, which is all the daily notes that I'm using. So it goes back to the 31st of March and all the way to today. Sometimes I create a daily note, sometimes I don't. It just depends on if I have something to capture. The other thing too that I do is that if I'm not directly inside of Obsidian, I also use drafts on my iPad and on my iPhone to capture thoughts. So if I'm reading something, say down on the couch in the morning on my phone, I'll usually write notes on that in drafts. And to be honest, I've just been really busy or really tired or really lazy lately and haven't copied it over. So that's kind of the story there. But drafts is a good capture point on the go if you need a resting place for text, and then you can get it into your system pretty easily later. The daily notes is, as I mentioned with earlier, is where I do all of my capturing. So if I open up this note from the 10th of June, I've got a couple of pages that I've created here where I watched a video from Pat Flynn on the Joe Rogan Spotify deal, and then also a Podia webinar to productize coaching. And what I did here is I created these pages because I knew I was going to take a few notes on them. And it gives it kind of an atomic feel to it, but it's not necessarily a crafted note. We can look at this Podia webinar if I click into it here. And I've got basically just some light metadata at the top, or I've got some tags that it's a video and it's a webinar and then it's a literature note. For me, a literature note is basically something that I'm taking notes on that I'm consuming: video, book, article, etc. I've got some pages that I've linked to here about where it's relevant. So Podia, Matt Ragland hosted the webinar. Jamar Diggs was the guest, and then the date, so that there's a backlink to that specific day.
And sorry, Justin, did you create that as a template, or every time you start a note, do you actually just type host and date?
I've been just typing it in because I'm still experimenting with trying to figure it out. But you could pretty easily create like a text expander or the like snippet to add it in there. It's just plain text with some markdown.
It's actually handy though when you start a new note to have that information. So it's neat.
Yeah, I've been finding that this is helpful. I mean, the reason that I do the type, is that it's just really easy to pull together all of the videos that I've watched or the literature notes that I've taken. The host or other notes is more topical that I do. It's easy to just kind of link to specific people or things or topics that I have so that I can see kind of what's related to what later on down the line. And then the date just gives me more of a frame of reference of where it is. And then at the bottom here, I've just taken some notes. These are the things that, questions that I've asked or links, things that stood out to me from the teaching or the video or whatever it is that I'm looking at. And just having it there is good to get into my system. This is the type of note taking that I would do previously all of the time. I would watch something, I would write things down that stood out to me. One thing that I've really tried to stop doing, as I mentioned earlier, is just quoting things and trying to take notes down, because it's really easy when you can type while you're watching something to almost try to get it down verbatim. But for me, it's like, okay, I have to, while I'm taking notes, take a step back and say, okay, what is interesting to me here? And why is that interesting? And then I can start to flesh out some of those things. A lot of times when I'm taking notes too, you can see I'm using bullet points, because that's just the way I think. I like to think in bullet points more so than full paragraphs when I'm taking notes. But when I'm writing, I'll write in paragraphs generally. So that's kind of just the general idea for my daily notes where I'm capturing things. I'll see if I've got another one over here that's interesting. I covered both of these in my walkthrough as well, but they're good examples as to how I'm using daily notes. This one I've just kind of used as a scratch pad where I have some thoughts on reading. I took a deep dive into what is Zettelkasten, because there's been a little bit of I've been trying to figure out exactly what Zettelkasten looks like, how you make a Zettelkasten, how you use it, what are the basic concepts of it. So I went through, found a really good article over on improvism.com that explains it really, really well. And so this was just me taking notes on that article, the things that stood out to me. It's a very, very well written article, I think, about what Zettelkasten is. So then I've just basically copied it in here, done some linking, and then long term, I'm going to come back to this and try to fashion some more permanent notes for it. So what I would do with that is I would create a note in this incubation folder here. And I'll just do one right now and say, because I want to make sure that I have a note on atomic notes, because that's an important topic for a Zettelkasten if you're going to take that method, because an atomic note is basically just whittled down to the core concept as much as you can. So we can talk about productivity. It's a really broad space. We can talk about note taking. That's even further broad space. You can narrow it down even further into Zettelkasten, but yet even so, that's still a little bit of a broad space. But atomic notes is an atomic concept inside of Zettelkasten. So I want to try to flesh that one topic out so that I can keep that. And then when you have multiple atomic notes, they're a lot easier to remix and move around and link together versus trying to say, okay, my big what is Zettelkasten note, how do you link around that? It's kind of a little bit more difficult to do so. So then what I'll do from here, in the note itself, if it will work for me. Apparently it's not working today. There it is. But what I'll do is I'll link back to that what is Zettelkasten note. So then I can reference back to that literature note that I have in this incubation note that I have. And then if I'm going to write on it, I'll just Control-Shift click, because I'm on Linux. It'd be Command-Shift click if you're on Mac. And then it can pull it up into a sidebar here. And so then I can start looking at these different pieces of information in that note and start writing on it, whatever I want to write in there at that point in time. Once I have...
I was going to say, I love that feature, the ability to sort of separate you. And you've got you can add up to 4 or 6.
Oh, you can add quite a few. Let's see here. Let's just go to my graph view for a second. So I think you can do like this, and then you can do, let's see here, this, and you can drag it around.
Oh yeah.
And you can have lots of different layouts for it, which is really cool, especially if you're dealing with lots of different topics. And I mean, you can have multiple different panes. You can stack them pretty wildly like that. It's pretty cool what you can do, to be honest. It's very, very flexible. But yeah, when I'm translating these incubation notes into a more permanent note, I've got a structure built called an index. And this is basically, it's from a concept found over on the Obsidian forums by Nick Milo called the IMF framework. And I didn't quite understand it at first, but as I thought about it and looked at it and played with it a little bit, it makes a lot of sense. You basically just create these really high level areas that you are interested in life. So I've got a few here. I've got spirituality, productivity, family life, software development, and business. I'm sure I will add others to this, but these are big bucket areas of topics that I'm interested in. And from there, I can whittle down even further and then get into more atomic notes where I can link them in together. So like in productivity, I have a couple books that I've linked here, just that I've copied in from other note-taking softwares. Hyperfocus by Chris Bailey and Deep Work by Cal Newport. These are my book notes from them. They're not as in-depth as I usually do, but it's, I've got some quotes and then lots of quotes apparently on this one. And then I haven't gone through these and done my own. Whoa, that went back too far. I haven't done my own, translating them into my own thoughts, just because I was taking notes at that time in a different manner.
And with that you've brought them in from other applications in the meaning that you've just copied the markdown file over?
Yeah, or I've just like with Rome, if you're moving from Rome to Obsidian, which some of these came over, you can import them in. I can't remember exact process of how to do it, but you can import the files into Obsidian, and then there's an import plugin which
Yeah.
converts all the syntax to be more Obsidian friendly, which is really
Oh.
helpful.
And
But
another question now, like, because obviously you came from Rome beforehand. Obviously, aside from the price being better this side, is there like anything like what was the reason to go with Obsidian over, say, Rome?
Well, I think the big thing that I like about Obsidian is that it feels a little bit more in my control. Where Rome's a SaaS app and that has a lot of benefits to it. You can access it on any device. It's just in web browser. But the downsides with that is that even despite privacy policies and stuff like that, I mean, the company they still host my data. That's the only place my data exists. And I'm more on the side where I like to have more control over my data, what's being done with it. And Rome, or Obsidian rather, is just markdown text files on my computer that I can sync whatever way I want to. I can use Dropbox, I can use Google Drive, I can use my Synology to sync files back and forth. And so I like the control over it. Plus, the other side of it too is I found the community with Obsidian to be really, really down to earth and very easy to work with. And it just fit my personality more so than the Rome community, and that community is good too. But I just really liked the Obsidian community more for my personality style.
Yeah, being a little bit nosy. Sorry.
No, it's all good.
Carry on.
So,
Sorry.
no, it's all good. So back to translating temporary notes into more permanent notes. One thing I did the other day was I created this focus map of content. And the map of content is really just a place where you can list things that are more permanent notes. And then eventually you build it into a jump off point to get into different topics or deeper, more atomic areas. All I've done here in this map of content, which is all I need right now, is I've put a link back to the productivity bucket that's one level above this. And then I have a note here that I translated into more of a permanent note from something I had read previously and made just a couple of paragraphs on it. So I had been looking at the four burners theory, which is an article that James Clear has. And it's a fantastic article talking about how life is full of trade-offs. You can't focus on every area at the same time. If you actually want to be successful, you have to make some trade-offs, pick 2 or 3 of those areas to truly be successful. And so then I have basically made these, just 4 short paragraphs on that idea of what I found to be impactful, and said that we have to embrace trade-offs and focus intently on what matters as the title of the note. And then that just kind of gives me an idea of 1, what that note is and what it says. And then 2, inside of the note, I have this explanation of what that means. And then I also have some notes here too that I want to build out further at a later point in time. So I've linked them, like putting out fires and solving problems makes you feel better, but it doesn't necessarily actually give you any progress in the areas that you want. And then multitasking is a myth. And it's something that I've been wrestling through with myself. So processing through these ideas also gives me a good semblance of how to implement this information in my life as well. It's not just for the sake of knowledge, but it's for the sake of using it. So for one, as I process through these things, it helps me to implement these things better in my life because I understand them better for myself. But then 2, as a content creator and as someone who creatively solves problems for people in my job, having lots of different ideas and thoughts spelled out inside of this system can help me better solve problems in the future. Francesco, before we got on the call here, Francesco and I were talking about a book called Range by David Epstein. And basically that book says that being a generalist and having knowledge from lots of different disciplinary areas can help you be more creative and solve problems, because you can see patterns in another area of study and apply it to maybe the one you're currently working on. And it gives you a bigger picture view of how you might be able to creatively solve those problems. And so that's kind of the idea that I'm taking with this system at the core is, how do I solve problems? How do I be more creative? Can I use information in a better fashion to make better videos, make better podcasts, help people out better? Because that's ultimately what I'm after in life, is I just want to help people and help them in the areas that they need help in as well. And maybe some areas that I've learned something in too. One cool thing that I want to hop over to in the graph view is just to show you what this looks like. It's pretty wild to see all the different connections that you have inside of Obsidian. But this is one of the neat things about these next generation note-taking tools that are coming out, like Roam and Obsidian. TiddlyWiki even has some capability to do this as well, is to see how everything is connected together. I'm a very visual person, and so being able to see like, oh, if I look at productivity, I have all of these different things that link to it. And then I've got this, I took some notes on CGP Gray's Spaceship U video that he did, which is fantastic description of how to be effective in a pandemic, or basically when you need to add structure to your life. I can see where that's connected, where basically, I read or listened to it, watched it on the 5th of June, and some different topics that it's tied to as well. So it's pretty cool to see just how things are connected together. I also use this view to kind of look for these like little one-offs, like, oh, this intentionality node over here is just kind of hanging on itself. Is there a place that I can integrate that into the system and things like that? That's generally it. I mean, that's Obsidian in a nutshell for me. I try to do 3 things in it, as I mentioned: capture information, translate that information into something permanent, and then file that in an area where I can access it and find it in an easy and streamlined way in the future to use it for a purpose.
It's a brilliant explanation. I like the concept of finding homes for these roaming. I couldn't say roaming. These subsidiaries that haven't got homes yet. I quite like that. And I think I use it in quite a sort of sensible way, because like each time it'll grow and it'll get bigger, but there's some sort of like structure to it when you start. Because that's one question I had for you is when people start, they don't normally have like an idea with these applications of the structure, because it's so open plan. Is there something that you did to get to this structure? Did you play around with it for a few weeks, or did you have this in mind from using Roam already?
Well, so it's been kind of a plotting journey of trying to figure it out as I go. And because usually I found out for me that when I tried to put a bunch of structure on something at the beginning, it just falls apart because I can't figure out all of the stuff that I need for it, or I tend to put too much structure when I actually need just a little bit. And this has been something that I have just kind of, as I've researched Zettelkasten and as I've researched other personal knowledge management methods, that I have decided to say, okay, I just need a way to at least have a process to get these pieces of information into a system. Will I continue doing the indexes and maps of content at some point? I might find it to be a little too much, and I might do something a little less intensive than that, but it still is yet to be seen from my system. If there's somebody who's starting off with Obsidian, though, I'd recommend that you start off using the daily notes and just start there. Every day you're in Obsidian, click this little button over here to open today's note. It'll open the note if it exists already today, or it'll create one with today's date. And then just start taking notes in there. And if you have something that seems to be a little bit more permanent, or something that, if you're reading a book and you want to take some notes on that, then use your hyperlinking, your wiki linking between the notes to create a new note. So if I go today and I say, all right, let's see, reading Atomic Habits by James Clear. I can just say that I'm reading that. And then I can click into that note and then add whatever I'm reading from that day to that note. And then if I'm reading it again tomorrow or in 3 days, I can link to that again and then continue to add notes there, whatever it is. Or if it's just something small, let's say, I read this cool article by Francesco, and then I can list off like a couple things that it made me think of. Whatever it is, I can just list off some things there. Or if I have an idea, something cool that I've seen that other people don't, or if I learned something today, it's just something simple. One neat thing you can do is you can use tags similar to how you use them in Roam. You don't have the block referencing like you do in Roam Research, but it searches very nicely in Obsidian. So today I learned Francesco has a baby. It's not something I learned today, but I'm just putting something. But then if I browse over to the TIL page and I pop open my backlinks, I can see all of the mentions. So if it's a little one-liner of like something that I can do, you can see I've got a backlink that Francesco has a baby, TIL there. So you can use it similar to how you use Roam. The beauty of the backlinks and the beauty of Obsidian and these next generation note-taking tools is that they're extremely flexible for how you organize data. So you can structure it like a traditional note-taking tool with folders and just putting notes in folders and linking them together like that. Or you can have a completely flat file structure and just wiki link back and forth. Or you can do something cool like this, where you can just use the daily notes and create these little topical pages and then rely on your linked mentions or unlinked mentions to navigate around and see what's there.
I love it. One of the things that I had to double check on the website, there's only desktop now, right? Obsidian?
Yes, at this point in time, but they have mobile clients in the roadmap. So I think they're planning on having them primarily be focused on capture and quick access to notes, like on your phone and such. My one hope is that they have a full, robust iPadOS app, because I know there's a lot of people who use iPadOS almost primarily these days. And I myself, a recent owner of an iPad Pro, I've been finding that to be a computer that I have drawn to more and more and more as the day goes on. So it's just so easy to use. My hope is that they have a full-fledged iPadOS app for that. But at this point in time, it's just a desktop.
Yeah, and now
it's a pretty young software too.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it doesn't bother you too much, right, when you're trying to clip stuff on the go, or?
No, it doesn't, and that's where I'm using Drafts. Because I'm not clipping a bunch of like specific articles, and trying to grab quotes and stuff. And I'm just more writing down thoughts. What I'll do is, if I'm reading something on my iPad, I'll have split screen view up, and on the left-hand side, I'll have whatever I'm reading or watching. And on the right-hand side, I'll have Drafts open. So then I can just quickly write down the thoughts that I have as I'm consuming that content. And then later on, I can go back and copy that from Drafts into the note system wherever it belongs. Generally in the daily notes is where that'll end up. But sometimes if I'm reading a book, it'll just go straight into the book note that I have.
Yeah, brilliant. I love how you've organized it. I think it's nice and simple, but also it's thought through, because for some people that'll be a nice warm introduction. So Justin, where can everyone find you after this video?
Yeah, well, you can find me particularly on Twitter at Justin DeRose. It's all one word. You can find Effective Remote Work at effectiveremotework.com. The Effective Remote Work YouTube channel is Effective Remote Work. You can just search us on YouTube and find us there. And then the podcast too is wow, I'm totally failing on this today. It is remotelyworking.net for remotely working, and then podcast.effectiveremotework.com for Process if you're interested in that too.
Yeah, and people should definitely go and subscribe to the YouTube, because it's Justin starting to do more and more Obsidian content. So if you're looking at this and going, actually, Obsidian looks like something I could use, then that's where to go. So thanks for coming on, Justin, and let's have you on pretty regularly.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Lovely job.
Thanks, Francesco.
Fake up, Trey. That was brilliant.